And then also finding out exactly who's on the line so that we can also figure out a way of maybe matching the information a little bit, or talking a little bit about your work that you're doing at the end of the webinar. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So my name is Claudia Plesha, and I'm a project coordinator for the Alaska Network on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. Can everyone hear me okay? Can folks hear me at all? Yes, we got a yes from Chad. Awesome. Thanks, Chad. You just never know sometimes. So I primarily work in violence prevention. What I do is I work with youth around the state, about 30 communities around the state, to do some violence prevention in their community. And so thank you for joining us. This is a series of webinars for February, which is Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, as we like to call it here, because we believe prevention is extremely important to this issue, and really addressing it in the long run. And so that's the work that I do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I do this work. But first, I'd also like to introduce Electra Gardner, who's my colleague here at the network, and who's also doing a lot of really great work for our organization and for our state. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Electra Gardner. I am the communications specialist here at ANDVSA, and I work a lot on promoting different materials, including materials that are a part of the programming. So that's why I'm here today, just to kind of talk more about some of the materials that we have created to get ready for this month.
And so I'll just kind of go right into it, but first I would like to know sort of where folks are at, and if you're not comfortable kind of talking to the entire audience, you can also type it in, but just let me know your first name and where you're from, just so that we can get a good understanding of where folks are at from across the state. So we've got a person from Petersburg. That's awesome. Another person from Petersburg. And Nikolsky. That's awesome. We're kind of across the state, and we also work with partner agencies around the state. And so I believe a lot of folks are actually going to listen to this information later on. But that's awesome. So we've got some Petersburg folks, some Nikolsky as well, and there may be some other folks joining us. We're housed here in Juneau, but we do work statewide. So I'll just go ahead and start. Teen dating violence is something that sometimes is hard for us to talk about. We're never quite sure how to address it. But over the years of doing this prevention work, we've learned what works, we've learned what doesn't work, and also we've also learned how to work with you all to adapt the information that you receive. So when we look at our state, and even nationwide, we know that there's a high precedence of both sexual assault and teen dating violence, and also intimate partner violence, which we know those healthy or unhealthy dating habits really develop in adolescence. So teen dating violence actually develops those unhealthy behaviors, and then as folks enter adulthood, those behaviors continue and they turn into intimate partner violence. And so I'm not going to go over the numbers too much. I think we kind of know where our state is at. We're higher than the national average, both for sexual assault and for intimate partner violence. And I think from that we can infer that we also probably have higher than normal teen dating violence numbers. And so so we really are focused on finding ways to prevent that and really having it not happen in the first place. So when we look at Alaska, we actually know that half of all Alaskan women in their lifetime sometimes have experienced intimate partner violence. And so those are really high numbers, and we're focused on youth so that really none of that happens. We can develop, healthy relationship habits together. And so a lot of the time, this is a public health issue, and we forget to talk about it that way or think about it in that way, but there are serious health impacts to intimate partner violence. And so we see that women experience PTSD-like symptoms. We also know that there's need for healthcare services and all of these other services in our communities. And we also know that there's an impact on the entire family, not just the two people sort of involved in a couple, but we see this kind of impact on the entire family. And so if we can impact this issue, we can impact a lot of different issues. So any questions so far? Okay, awesome. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is what's going on nationally for engaging youth as far as violence prevention. There's lots of resources out there. I think a lot of our communities really care about this issue, but they don't really know where to start or what to do. And so we have some resources to help you engage youth in your communities, some that are local, some that are nationwide resources, and then we also have resources for engaging the entire community. So what are some ways of engaging parents? What are some best practices that we can use as we share this message? So the first resource that I'd really like to highlight, and there's just so much there, is Love is Respect. And their goal is to promote healthy relationships. And one of the things that is really, really cool, which is not something that we can provide here in Alaska, but they have a text and chat line that is 24/7 and also has peer advocates. So we have a resource. This resource is great because youth can actually talk to other youth about these issues. So not just a teacher, and a lot of our communities are very small. So in a sense, that's necessary for somebody who's trying to maintain some anonymity. And so for those of you that are going to listen to this later on, I do want to say the number out loud, and that's 1-866-331-9474. And you can also text Love Is to 22522. So these are really great resources for youth. Youth are also, one of the things we've learned is that youth are very comfortable discussing things via text or talking via text. They may not call or want to talk to a person that way. So this is a really important resource for youth. And I think if you're dealing with intervening in some way or having youth talk to each other, this is a great resource for them to share with one another. They also have a ton of information and resources there, and another thing that I think is really important is that they have digital abuse resources as well. So we see that teens are really living a big parts of their lives online. That's where they're absorbing a lot of information, and it's really good to have some resources to give both to parents and to youth in really how to deal with some of that. And they also have some February events that are coming up. And so those are also, I'll talk about those a little bit. So there's a Twitter chat. Oh, I don't think I put the date on there. But if you go on Love is Respect, you can find that information. I believe it's middle of February. But there's a Twitter chat on what boundaries are and how to really define those within a relationship. And so it's a way for youth to get engaged if they're online or if they are if they use Twitter and things like that, because we also know that they're migrating from Facebook, and so something that's more interactive would be Twitter. There's also another webinar that's taking place that's separate from ours. And this webinar, it's really talking about what the current trends are for social and cultural norms from a young person's perspective. They absorb so much media, they absorb so many things that we can't relate to, we didn't grow up with, and so it's really important to think about those things from their perspective and for them to talk about them with their peers. So this is a great webinar to join, and I think the dual audience piece is really important. We have both youth and adults that can learn how to address some of these topics, but then also learn how to use their voice and talk about their experiences. Are there any questions so far? And as I go, I know that I tend to talk a whole bunch. So if you want to type up a question in the chat box, I look up, and so I'll be able to answer those as well. Very. Do you mind typing it out? It's not coming through. We're just hearing some static. So I'd love to answer your question if you could type it out there. Okay. So maybe while we wait for that question, we can continue on. So that's the really great part about Love is Respect, is that there's so many resources there. A lot of the time we don't know where to start. A lot of the time we're not quite sure what to talk about, but there are great resources that talk about all of those issues. And there's also even a packet that they put together for Respect Week. So this is something that you could incorporate into what you're doing. It really breaks down those activities, and it provides a way to keep youth engaged for more than just a one-time event. And so it can be something that you can work with a leadership group on. It could be something that you incorporate into either a class. You can incorporate into a class, or you could even provide to adults that are trying to do this training for youth in their communities. So it certainly works for many audiences. So I'll also go over some of the resources as well there. They certainly have a lot more resources than I think we are able to provide here in our state, but we also have some resources that are very specific to Alaska. But I definitely wouldn't discount the national pieces. So Respect Week, there's a guide that you can download. There's also additional ideas and resources, and we're in Alaska, so I think we can create our own timelines around when we want to do some of these activities. So I would encourage you to kind of get inspiration from the national activities and to figure out what works for your community. So there's also some very great resources that you can download for free. And I think that that's the really nice thing. Sometimes we think of our work as being dependent on money and resources, but there's a lot of these great resources online. So we have conversation cards and safety planning cards. There's bookmarks. And there's also a ton of handouts on very specific information. So how to document abuse, how to take action if you see something that's happening. There's also definitely some prevention pieces that are very important to talk to youth about. So having them think about whether they are good partners themselves and what a good partner looks like. Those are all really important. What are boundaries? How do you set boundaries? And then also, you know, sexual health information. So these are all things that are important to youth relationships, and there's some great resources there if you need to find out more about. And I don't know what some of the kind of issues are in your community, but I do encourage you to explore this resource because more likely than not, you will find something that is helpful for you. And then I also mentioned that they have digital abuse resources, and that's also another very important piece. As we look at the demographics for where teens are, where they spend their time, we see that they're online a lot. We see that they interact online through all of these apps, through all of these chat and social media sites. And so us as teachers, as educators, us as parents, sometimes we don't know how to really address that, and we don't live our lives there. However, there's some really great information, and as this trend is very real in our youth's life, we also see that abuse can happen there, and also lots of parts of relationships happen there. So how do we impact this piece as well? And I'm happy to say that there's some resources out there. So are there any questions about the Love is Respect resources? All right. Perfect. So what we'll do is we're going to talk a little bit about what our sort of Alaskan resources are, and I think that these are also really important, both because they provide in-person engagement opportunities, but then also because there's some real people that can give you advice as you put on these activities. So I'll talk a little bit about the series of webinars that you all have probably heard about because you're on this one. We'll talk about a poster contest that we have, and then also give you a chance to order some materials if you think that your community could use them. So there's a series of webinars that we're putting on for this month, and if you go to standupspeakupalaska.org, you'll see that we do cover kind of a variety of topics, and they kind of get more complex as we go. Part of it is, the first topic is really how to get involved. I want people to know that we don't have to reinvent the wheel each time. We really have a lot of resources out there, so how to get involved. It's the first one, and you're all part of it. We also have Prevention 101. It's sometimes difficult to figure out how exactly to do violence prevention, but we figured out some things here at the state level that we would love to share, and there's some programs and resources that you, as an Alaskan, have access to. Then we're going to talk about shared risk and protective factors. I talked at the beginning about the links between all of these issues in our communities, and so how do we work together with other organizations doing prevention work to really link our work? Because if we can prevent teen dating violence, we can also in some ways prevent substance abuse, because that's a coping mechanism. We can also prevent some mental health issues which are related to depression, which is something that somebody who's a victim may develop. So these are all important. And then the last topic, which Electra will talk about, is self-care. So when we do this work, and even in our communities where we know that there's trauma still happening, how do we take care of ourselves, and how do we take care of the people that we work with, so that we can continue to give and we can continue to work with our communities. So are there any questions about the webinars? All right. So Electra's going to talk a little bit about the poster contest. Oh, no. So I'm sorry. I'm skipping ahead. We also have great resources at our standupspeakupalaska.org site. And so you can see our webinar schedule there. And then I'll turn it over to Electra, and she'll tell us about our poster contest that we have.
Hi, everyone. So for the first time this year, ANDVSA is hosting a poster contest. The audience for the contest is middle and high school age students, and the deadline for the final submissions is Monday, March 28th. So they have quite a bit of time to complete a poster. What we're really looking for is for students to create imagery about what they want the world to look like without violence. Throughout Alaska, we have worked in our violence prevention programming to talk to students about when they are elders, what they want the world to look like. And you may have seen some of our public service announcements on television and on YouTube where students share their poems of how they envision a world without violence. So this is an opportunity for students throughout the state to contribute to that message by creating posters. Let me give you some more information about the posters themselves. Posters must include original artwork on 8.5 by 11 or 8.5 by 14 paper. If you need any paper or resources for creating the posters, please let us know, and we can probably find that either within your community or send it out your way. The poster must also include the phrase, "This is what my community will look like without violence." And it can be handwritten or typed, but make sure that it's legible. And then a short registration form. We're going to be posting this poster for the poster contest, as well as a registration form and a letter to parents and teachers about the poster contest. And we will post all of that information on susuak.org or standupspeakupalaska.org, as well as on our website, andvsa.org, and on our Facebook pages. So you should be able to find it in multiple places. We're really hoping that this will give students an opportunity to really think about violence prevention and do so in a really creative way. As you can see, winners will be chosen from both middle school and high school categories. So one middle schooler and one high schooler will win both a grand prize and a second place prize. Grand prize winners will receive an iPod Touch and a $50 iTunes card. And second place winners will receive a $25 iTunes card and a $25 Amazon gift card. There are some pretty great prizes. I think the coolest part of it all is that grand prize winner will be able to have original and posted. The original poster will be able to be printed by us and distributed throughout the community and throughout the state. This is a really good chance for students to build their resume and work on a fun, creative project. So please, if you know any educators, parents, youth groups, church groups in your region who might be interested in participating, please pass this information along to them. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Electra. So we've got this awesome poster contest, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about at the end, not for too long, but what are best practices, and one of them is really getting youth to interact with this information, put their own voice into it, and be part of it in some way. So not just giving another presentation on what a bad relationship might be, but having them interact and tell you what a good relationship would look like from their own perspective. And so having them interact with the materials, having them create their own materials, that is more powerful, and that works much better to be able to share this information and have it actually stick. So thank you, Electra. This is a great activity that can kind of do that for youth. There's also some great downloads at standupspeakupalaska.org. We have an activity guide that can help you use our healthy relationship cards, which are downloadable as well. And we also have some posters that you can download or order. So that's something that we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you go to standupspeakupalaska.org, there's this activity guide that can help you use these resources in a way that interacts with youth and that isn't just kind of giving another school presentation. So we have healthy relationship cards, and these were created with youth. They cover a variety of topics in regards to healthy relationships. And we also have posters that were created with youth, which can help you spread that message sort of around a wider audience, maybe in a school or inside of a community. And I'll share this PowerPoint with you all. I'll send out an email. But there's also an order form on SurveyMonkey that you could use to order these materials. And what we'll do is we'll send them straight to you. We just have to know how many and sort of how many will be impacted in the community. So that's something that we'll provide after. You can also email cplesa@andvsa.org and have access to these resources. So what I want to do now is I want to talk a little bit about how you would actually use some of these resources in a community and what that might look like. And I want to use an example from Sitka. So one thing that they've been able to do is meet with a group of youth regularly and have them receive healthy relationship information, but then having them turn that information into media campaigns for their community. So what Sitka has done in their community, Sitka Youth Leadership Committee has done in their community, is they started an I Am campaign. And this is something that I want to encourage you also to join as a way of getting youth excited or involved, or maybe even doing their own I Am campaign. But the idea is that if you, the I Am campaign promotes respect. And how do they do that? They really do that by having youth learn how to recognize their own strengths and talk about the things that are positive about them. So increasing that self-esteem, increasing their strengths, increasing the things that make them unique. And so if you promote that among the teens in your community, they're more likely to be connected to each other, have healthier norms for themselves, and then also have healthier norms in their relationships. And so the way that you actually approach using these materials can really vary depending on the youth that you're working with, depending on your community, and depending on the resources that you have access to. So they are encouraging folks to take the Respect Challenge, and so connecting all of us across the state, but then connecting to Sitka. And they've broken down how to do that. And so how do I take the challenge? Youth can actually tag and nominate others. They can put in their own picture, and then they choose a positive adjective to describe themselves. And so this is a campaign that it really is focused on Sitka, but they've been able to take it statewide. And it really is, again, about promoting those positive things for youth and teaching them about healthy relationships, and then having them share some of those positive things with their community. So one thing that are there any questions? Again, if you all wouldn't mind typing them, it's been kind of hard to have the sound be on. So we know that when we're doing prevention work, we really want to engage the entire community. We want to work with not just the youth, not just the little kiddos, or even middle schoolers. We want to also work with the entire community and the entire family. So one resource that we've provided to start that conversation with parents are the Talk Now, Talk Often program. So the Talk Now, Talk Often program really came about because parents were saying, you know, kids aren't talking to me about their relationships, and I also don't know how to start that conversation myself, but I know it's really important, so I feel like I'm missing something. And so we worked with parents to develop some conversation cards that can help develop that trust. And then we also worked with communities to put on events that also achieve sort of that same purpose in the community by getting youth and adults physically in person together and having conversations. So Talk Now, Talk Often cards are also available for free. Talk Now, Talk Often also has a website, and there's a video and some other resources that you can use to share with parents or to use yourself to start the conversation. And you can also download the cards as well for instant access. So the last thing that one of the last things that I'd like to talk about, and then I think I'd like to hear from you all, if this is something that you're interested in doing, I'd like to talk about some best practices for getting others to join and for presenting this information in your community. So one of the best things I think that helps the community get ready for doing some of this work is really for us to think about who our audience is. So if we're approaching youth in our community, the strategy may look different than if we're approaching elders or parents. And so know your audience and do some work, do some research in both talking with them and finding out what their needs are and finding out where they congregate and share information. So know your audience, prepare for that, and cater your message to that. When we talk to parents about Talk Now, Talk Often, we use a slightly different message, which is around those conversations rather than the rates of violence. So because that's what parents are going to relate to. And so that's what we try to do. We try to change our message for the audience so that the audience really is hearing what's pertinent to them. And so when we're talking to youth, we're also talking about online abuse and some of these other things. So because that's what's relevant to them. And so change your message, work with your audience so that you are focused and you're able to share the proper resources with them. I also think that there's lots of great people, whether in your community or in your region, that are doing some kind of prevention work. And it could be violence prevention, and that's getting really, really close to what you would want to do. But it could also be that they're doing other prevention work. And so instead of kind of starting a new group or reinventing the wheel, we could partner with those folks and strengthen their message or strengthen their focus so that it also includes healthy relationships. I also think that finding resources in your community is really important. There's public health nurses in most communities. There's teachers that come in contact with youth, and there's also parents. There's also elders in communities, and then there's also other kinds of resources like funds that organizations may have to put on events or to bring youth together to connect. So I think trying to find those resources in your community and working with what you have is a good starting point. I also think that using these free resources that are available nationally and statewide, it's really important. So reach out to ANDVSA, reach out to Love is Respect, and make sure to use those resources because there isn't a reason to create all of those. It's better to spend your time adapting those resources to your community rather than creating them from scratch. So it's also important to know what your message is, which is a little different than your audience, but adapt your message to your community. And then also, I would say, make the message be positive. Youth a lot of the time hear about what not to do. They hear about what will get them in trouble. They hear about what's going to limit them in the future, but they don't hear about what to do as far as a healthy relationship. So provide that positive piece, both for parents, youth, teachers, or any other adults. Provide what they can do. Provide positive ways to move forward rather than either statistics. I think we know where our communities are at a lot of the time, but we don't know what to do about it. So make sure to adapt your message so that it is useful and folks can find a way forward using it. I also think it's important to meet people where they're at. A lot of folks just didn't have any healthy relationship education. We don't have sexual health standards in our state. There are some bizarre myths out there, even from media and these other sources. And so meet people where they're at and have them discuss their own ideas, their own beliefs, and then together we can move towards healthy relationship messaging. But I do think it's important to know where your community is at, gauge that, and address that versus trying to assume that people sort of know all of this information. And I think lastly, and this is also an important piece, when we do this kind of work, even if we share positive messages, even if we share positive ways forward, there are going to be times where folks might disclose to you abuse or unsafe situations of some kind. And so I think that even while we're doing prevention work, we always have to be ready to help. We always have to provide some resources that can kind of provide some of that safety planning, some of that instant help for our community. So just remember what your steps are and educate yourself a little bit about what you could do to help that person that may come to you. And so because I think really what the ultimate goal is for all of us, most of us want a happier, healthier community. And this is something that a youth said in the past, but what she wanted to see was to know the cycle of salmon, not the cycle of violence. And so that's what I think all of our goal is for our communities, for our state, and it's just a matter of figuring out what works for our communities, what resources are out there, and how to really bring that back to our communities. So thank you so much for being here. I think that this is a great way to start the conversation and to lay out the resources that are out there and also let you know about some ways for engagement. So I would encourage all of you to bring the poster contest back to your communities, to order some resources through that link that I will provide, and to also really think about how to address it in a way that's specific to your community and specific to the needs that are there. So I'd like to open it up to questions. I'll try unmuting one more time, see if that works. If not, please go ahead and type them in, and we'll go from there. But I would like to hear from you if there's any questions, or if there's any work that you're doing that you think could be strengthened by some of these resources.
I don't know what to say.
That's okay. Is this Sherry?
Yes, and I apologize. I thought I had this on mute the whole time, like I have a Jabra speaker, and I want to apologize to everyone. I had no idea that you could still hear my coffee machine go off, and I apologize.
No,
that's what that was.
Oh, makes me want some coffee now.
Yeah.
Oh, no worries.
I've been able to see this training. Gosh, we went to I don't know, I can't remember what you call it. I apologize. A thing over in Juneau, and where we were talking about violence and trying to come up with different programs in our communities. I've always been advocating for boys to men program. You know, we've always tried to have something, because we've always had girls on the run in our community, and we've even had parents that were like, well, let's just get a running group together. So we would have all of our boys, you know, get together down at Cannon Beach to do stuff like that. But so I was kind of introduced to this. It was at the Domestic Violence Summit in Juneau, and so I love to hear a lot of things coming from like older kids. Some way to reach out that they're more familiar with, the texting, the chat, those types of things, because they're pretty, at least my son, he's 15, he doesn't want to talk to anyone about it. He'd rather, you know, figure it out himself. And most of it is through our internet. So I think that's a great tool to have for our children.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that that's where teens are migrating to, and I think that it's important for us to get more familiar with that. And I think one of the things that's really, really helpful, Sherry, that I have found is actually have youth talk about those. And that might be harder to do, but I think if you can get youth to talk about some of those things and give specific examples of what it might look like, because I think sometimes it's ambiguous, and they're also, you know, used to maybe seeing extreme unhealthy behaviors rather than just problematic behaviors, right? So they're thinking like, if somebody's really abusive, they're going to, you know, hurt me in some way. But a lot of the time it shows up as problematic behaviors that that I think we can address that I think we can address, but youth don't necessarily see as abuse because we don't have those concrete examples to relate to. So if you can work with youth when you're doing presentations or when you're talking about some of these things, that seems to help because they have those concrete lived experiences.
Right. And I just had a gentleman, just poke, well, he's a high schooler, he poked his head in here and he's like, what do you guys do? What are you doing? And he's like, what about this iPod? Or something like that, you know, sorry about that. And so I was trying to give him some information on it. So, and I think that, like you say, you know, getting them to talk about it and spread the opportunity to reach out and learn healthy relationships. So, yeah.
So Annette, trying to see if you're from Petersburg. Awesome. So Annette, I think here's a few ways that I've been able to get youth involved. But I think it may depend on the community, and this is something that you can think about. But what is the lay of the land for your community as far as youth leadership groups? And so what I try to do, as opposed to creating a new group in the community, is I try to find out, are there some groups of teens that are already meeting? Are they addressing any of these issues? Are they interested in doing so? And I think that that's a good way to start, because there's already a structure there for them meeting, addressing some issues. If that's not really possible, I think that what helps the most is meeting them where they're at. So we talked about, you know, meeting them online or providing resources for that piece, but I also think meeting them where they're at, as in physically, most of the time they're at school. And so creating a relationship or a partnership with the school, finding out what's going on there, and finding a partner within the school that can help share some of this information. So a lot of the time it could be a health teacher, it could just be a classroom teacher, even an administrator. And then I believe it's about working with the youth to have them tell you how they'd like to be involved and what pieces they would like to address. And part of it is, you know, providing some education to them and some information. So they may not know how to address it until they have some of that information, but they might have some ideas. So I think throughout the process is meeting them where they're at, finding out where youth leaders are in the school, or connecting to an adult that's already meeting with them and that can provide some of this information, and then also having some kind of a community conversation with the youth that says, are you interested in addressing this? And if so, how? And let's figure that out together. And, you know, potentially use some of these resources. But I think that youth really have to be part of the conversation from the beginning for it to be impactful, and for them to feel like they're full partners in making an impact. And I mean, I've stopped being surprised, but youth are actually very interested in talking about this, very interested in addressing it, and a lot of the time are much more direct than we are. Annette, did that help? And another piece is actually partnering up with anti-bullying. I think that that's a lot of the time happening within the schools. And when we look at the trajectory between being kind of a perpetrator of violence or a victim, we see that people that, you know, bully, and there's lots of reasons why people might bully, right? But that then, when they start to date, that turns into sometimes intimate partner violence. So if we can make that link, sometimes we can actually partner with the folks doing bullying prevention within the schools and strengthen that piece, while also helping our teenagers and those that are starting to date. So I hope that helped, Annette. Are there other questions as you're thinking about doing this work? All right. All right, well, it seems like there's no other questions, unless someone's trying to talk, but I think that's just me. I do want to encourage all of you to take the Prevention 101 webinar, which is next week. I believe that that's going to help you break down more of the strategies around how to plan for prevention at the community level, so addressing more than one factor. Sherry talked about how Girls on the Run is engaging young girls. There's also Boys on the Run. There's also these other strategies, and there's also strategies that kind of cut across multiple sectors of a community. And so we're impacting more than one group, and we're linking those messages. And so how to plan for that? What are some strategies? And what are some risk and protective factors that we can link up to other issues that we can kind of partner alongside with. So those are the things that we're going to talk about next week, and there are more prevention trainings as well that I'll talk about that go into even more depth. So how do we evaluate our impact? How do we create proper strategies for our communities? And who do we partner with? So I want to encourage all of you to also join that webinar. And also, if you can, to go ahead and listen to the recordings, and also to reach out to me or to Electra if you have any more questions. We provide great trainings here at ANDVSA, both for professionals and youth, and also for community members such as parents around how to remain involved, and also resources that can help. So thank you again for being here. I appreciate it, and I really, really hope that you take some of this and you bring it back to your community.
Well, thank you. We'll see you next week, or talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Bye.
Thank you.